Hi, Trudy.
Hi, great to be here.
So, Trudy is the founder of X-PERT Health, which is an award-winning nonprofit focused on empowering individuals through education in diabetes and weight management as well. So, could you please share more about X-PERT Health and what it is exactly that you guys do?
Okay, well, it all started. I was working in the NHS, the health service in the UK, and I was a registered dietitian. And I was specialised in diabetes, and I was working with people with diabetes. And I was doing 9 clinics a week, and people were coming in and saying, "But Trudy, I don't eat sugar, so why are my blood sugars high?" And I realised that people didn't understand what happened to food when they ate it. A slice of bread, the potatoes, the rice, the pasta, all breaks down to glucose and impacts on blood glucose levels. And they didn't understand that. So I started to make models at home and take it into the clinics to explain to people what happened to the foods when they broke down. And I could see that light bulb moment. So then I realised that we weren't helping people to self-manage their condition. So I started to run group education programmes and focus groups to ask people what information would better help them to self-manage their condition. And what they told me loud and clear is that, we want to understand our bodies better. We want to understand how food and nutrition impacts on our health. So I got pregnant. I went off onto maternity leave. He's now 25 years old. Can't believe that. And put together the X-PERT Diabetes programme. But I wasn't allowed, when I returned to work in the NHS in the UK, I wasn't allowed to deliver the programme because it wasn't evidence-based. There was no evidence that it was successful. So then I did my PhD, my doctorate, with a clinical trial there was 312 people, and half of them were invited to attend the programme and half of them got individual appointments with a doctor, nurse and dietitian. And the results were outstanding. So the people who attended a 6-week programme had highly significant improvements in their health, their diabetes control, their well-being, their quality of life, not just in the short term but in the longer term as well. So it won the Secretary of State for Health's award for excellence in healthcare. And then other organisations in the UK wanted to start delivering the programme. So I came out of the NHS and developed the charity, the not-for-profit, X-PERT Health. And so we've now got the X-PERT Diabetes programme for the prevention and management of type 2 diabetes. We've got the X-PERT Insulin programme for type 2s on insulin, but also for type 1s. And we also have the X-PERT Weight and Wellbeing programme, and that's all about preventing or treating overweight and obesity.
So, you're talking about insulin. So, do you think you could explain a bit about insulin and insulin resistance and how it plays a role in diabetes?
Yes, so type 1 diabetes, often diagnosed when people are younger, but not always. People, when they're older, can be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that is caused when the body stops producing insulin. So we have some cells in the pancreas called beta cells, and in a healthy individual they produce insulin. And what we need insulin for is that when we eat carbohydrate food, blood glucose levels rise, and to get the glucose out of the blood and into the body cells where we can convert it into energy, we need insulin. So insulin, we explain to patients that insulin is a little bit like a key, and it unlocks the door on the cell wall, opens the cell door, allows the glucose to leave the blood and enter the cell where it becomes converted into energy. And we should only have around a teaspoon of sugar or glucose in our blood at any time. So this regulation of the blood glucose levels is really, really important. So type 1 diabetes, people just stop producing the insulin and they lose a dramatic amount of weight before they're diagnosed. when they're diagnosed, they've got to start taking the insulin in daily, either by injections or an insulin pump. So that's a different condition to pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. That's a condition of insulin resistance. So people produce the insulin in the pancreas, but the insulin doesn't work as well. It can't quite fit that keyhole and unlock the door so the glucose can leave the blood and go into the cell. So the body responds to that by asking the pancreas to make even more insulin. So type 2 diabetes is a condition that we call hyperinsulinemia, which means a lot of insulin circulating in the blood, and that insulin doesn't quite work as well. The problem with the high insulin levels is that insulin is a hormone and it tells the body to store energy. And so when people have high insulin levels, their body is in energy storage mode, which means that they are storing carbohydrates as glycogen, they're storing fat in their fat cells, and so they're putting on weight. So people often really struggle to control their body weight if they've got pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes.
With these insulin spikes, how do people control this to make sure that their insulin isn't spiking throughout the day?
So that's all to do with diet and lifestyle. So first of all, we talk about physical activity. When people are physically active, that allows the muscle cells to contract, and when the muscle cells contract, it allows the glucose to leave the blood and enter the cells without requiring the insulin. So having a non-sedentary lifestyle and being active, especially doing the resistance exercises, using their own body weight or weights, really helps that. Squats, lunges, plank, things like that. But also we know you can't outrun or over-exercise a bad diet. So diet is crucial. So carbohydrate is the only nutrient that directly impacts blood glucose levels. So we've got three main nutrients: protein, carbohydrate and fat. Protein is absolutely essential. We need it because it makes us feel fuller. It helps to keep our lean body mass intact. So then we've got higher metabolic rate. Fat is also essential, but carbohydrates are not essential because if we don't eat them, our liver can make glucose. And our liver can make up to 25 grams of glucose every hour throughout the day if it needs to. And so nowadays our diets are often based around what we call the beige. So people have very beige diets and lots of refined carbohydrates. All those carbohydrates are just building blocks of glucose. So when they eat a lot of carbohydrates, so for example, cereal and toast and bread and fruit juice at breakfast, all breaks down to glucose, which causes the blood glucose levels to spike. Then people are often grazing throughout the day, and at lunch they often having sandwiches and burgers and fries. All that is glucose again. And then in the evening meal, having rice, big bowls of pasta and rice and potatoes, and that causes the blood glucose to spike, and then it causes the insulin to spike, and that puts people in the fat storage mode. So by people turning their diet around and becoming more carbohydrate aware and eating to their carbohydrate tolerance rate, and it's different for all of us, but basically it means kind of omitting as many refined carbohydrates as possible and keeping the low glycemic or the slow releasing carbohydrates to their tolerance level, and that helps to turn everything around.
Wow, I think that it's like so interesting and kind of shocking for most people because they wouldn't think, okay, if I'm eating a bowl of cereal like Cheerios or eating a bagel, they wouldn't think, oh, well, it's converting into glucose in the body. So it's kind of like eating candy, right? It's like the same in the body.
Yeah.
So that's like
So
really interesting.
Yeah, and so people say, but I don't eat sugar, but they are eating sugar. It's just that it doesn't taste sweet, but it breaks down to sugar in the body.
And what do you think about brown rice and whole wheat breads or whole grain breads? Do you think that's also converting into insulin spikes?
So wholemeal bread and white bread is only one difference point on the glycemic index thing. So foods that are high glycemic index have got a rating of over 70, and wholemeal bread has got a rating of 69, and white bread has got a rating of 70. That's a 1 point difference. So it releases the glucose at almost the same rate. Okay, the wholemeal bread has got a bit more fibre. We can get fibre from our fruits and our veggies, and so basmati rice is slightly lower, and granary and cedar breads are slightly lower, but it needs to be portion controlled and people not to over consume these starchy foods.
Yeah, so if somebody switches to a diet without carbohydrates and without sugar, what types of differences do you think that they'll see, quickly and then also in the long run?
So we define a low carbohydrate diet as eating fewer than 130 grams of carbohydrate a day. And so initially when people have a low carbohydrate diet, they really need to make sure that they have enough fluids, and they also add salt as well, because when their insulin levels go down in their blood, then they urinate more sodium or salt in their urine, and so they need to replace that essential mineral back in. And so people can call it low carb flu as their body adapts, and it can take a few weeks for their body to adapt to become a fat burner rather than a carbohydrate burner. But initially, almost immediately, people see an improvement in their blood glucose levels, and they see that they can start losing weight because they're now starting to burn fat for energy rather than being in fat storage mode as well. Some people decide to go even stricter and go on what we call a keto diet, and the keto diet is a diet which is fewer than around 50 grams of carbohydrate a day, and that means that they're really using fat for their preferred energy source. And a byproduct when people use fat for an energy source is a natural product that's made in the liver called ketones, and the brain very much likes to feed off these ketones because we call it a very clean energy, and so it's very good for the brain, these ketones. People who work or have heard about diabetes get very fearful when they hear about ketones, because in type 1 diabetes, when it's not controlled and they're dramatically burning fat and losing a lot of weight, the ketones build up very, very high. That's a different condition. We call that DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis, and that's when blood glucose levels are raised, there isn't enough insulin in the body because they're not making it, and ketone levels are very, very high. Nutritional ketosis is a healthy condition, and levels are between 0.5 and 3 millimole per litre if you work with those units, and that's a healthy state to be in. In fact, when children are going through growth spurts and you wake them up in the morning, you can often smell pear drops on their breath, and that's because that's the ketones, because they've used up their glycogen stores when they've been sleeping in the night, and they've gone into their fat stores and started burning their fat stores as energy, and they produce the ketones, and so you can smell that on their breath when you wake them up in the morning.
For someone with like type 1 or type 2 diabetes, you would recommend a keto diet?
So we offer different, we recognise that one size doesn't fit all. We're all unique, we're all different, we've all got different needs, tastes and preferences. So in our programs we offer a variety of different dietary approaches. We offer low fat because some people don't like the taste and the texture of fatty foods. We offer Mediterranean style of eating. We offer low carbohydrate and the keto diet, and we offer intermittent fasting as well. And so we educate the participants to understand the different dietary approaches, and then it's all about self-management and then making informed decisions, so then they can choose to experiment and try out the dietary approach that they think will be the right one for them. In the education, everyone becomes more carbohydrate aware, and so they're discouraged from consuming the refined carbohydrates, and so we're talking about the slow release, low glycemic index carbohydrates. But people on a low fat diet, because fat and carbs is like a seesaw, so if people restrict the carbohydrate they tend to have more fat, but if people restrict the fat they tend to have more carbohydrate. So we do encourage people to test and make sure that they're not consuming carbohydrates above their tolerance level. But no matter what dietary approach they choose, we really discourage the use of the ultra-processed foods. So we talk about the real foods compared to the ultra-processed foods. And the ultra-processed foods are foods that have had things either added to them or taken away. They're often in packaging. They've got a very long list of ingredients, often ingredients that people don't recognise the names of and certainly wouldn't have in their cupboard at home. And so general rule of thumb, we say try to, if it does come in packaging with a nutritional label, then try to choose foods that have fewer than 5 ingredients, and those 5 ingredients should be ingredients that you recognise. So we look at the quality of the diet that's made such a difference to people.
And are you noticing that the people in the organization are able to reverse their diabetes?
Absolutely. So it's almost 20 years now where the first clinical trial was published, and since then about 500,000 people have gone through our programs, and we're seeing a huge increase in people now going into remission. So when I first started working in diabetes, we were told that type 2 diabetes was a progressive condition and eventually everyone would need the insulin, whereas now we can halt and even reverse the progression. So we're seeing over 50% of our patients either just reducing or completely omitting their prescribed diabetes medication and getting their HbA1c, which is the measure of the long-term diabetes control, back down to normal levels. And that's solely through the lifestyle changes that they're making.
And what are the common factors between all the people in your program that are able to reach remission?
Well, in the UK, people can often be referred to programs, but they say that if they can't be referred to a remission program if they've had type 2 diabetes for more than 6 years. But what we're seeing through X-PERT Health is often people have had diabetes for 10, 20 years and they're still able to achieve remission. So my message to people is, we can't promise that you will achieve remission, but if it's something that you're really keen on doing, give it a try, because there's every chance that if you make the lifestyle changes, there's every chance that you will be able to put it into remission.
Wow, that's amazing. Everything that you're doing, it's really impacting so many people's lives. So that's truly inspirational. So how do you think the healthcare industry can maybe learn from your organization or, change their approach in treating diabetes?
I think healthcare professional training is absolute key, because one thing that really upsets the people living with diabetes is the conflicting messages that they get from different healthcare professionals, and then they get really frustrated and confused. And so I do quite a lot of training into practice nurses and general practitioners, primary care staff, to upskill their nutritional knowledge, because we say one thing and then they go to see their doctor and the doctor says, oh, you can't do that, it's not good for you. Like intermittent fasting, we are a team of researchers, all either MSc or PhD, and we constantly keep abreast of the latest research evidence, and we do our own research ourselves, and we know that breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. So just before we wake in the morning, we get a peak of cortisol, and that tells our body to release energy into our circulation. So even if we don't physically put things in our mouth to eat, our body's fed first thing in the morning. And so a lot of people now do the time restricted eating, where they will just perhaps eat an 8-hour window in a day and fast for 16 hours. And some people might break their overnight fast at 11 o'clock in the morning and then start fasting again at 7 o'clock at night. And that means delaying the breakfast. And sometimes people get this and they get great results, and they go back to the doctor and the doctor says, but you can't do that, you need to have your breakfast. And so one of the things that we need to work together, all the healthcare professionals, and make sure that all staff are in line with the latest evidence base, because they do say it's a 17-year lag time from research to practice, and we really do need to close that gap.
Yeah, so do you think that everybody should be starting with intermittent fasting?
Not everybody knows. There's some people that naturally need their 3 square meals a day, and that works for them, and they achieve their health goals. So it's about people asking themselves, am I feeling healthy at the moment? Is my diabetes in control? Do I want to go into remission? And if their answers to any of their questions is, well, no, I need to be healthier, then it's one thing that they could try. And if they try it and they achieve their health goals, then it's the right thing for them to do. So we really encourage people to experiment. I can't say to somebody that will work for you. I say, if you're interested in trying it, the research evidence says that it can result in X, Y, and Z, improved diabetes control, weight loss, better sleep, this and that, the other. But try it, see if it works for you.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really appreciate this, and everything that you said was very inspiring and amazing. So thank you so much.